The expectations for Ferrari heading into Miami were absolutely massive. Fans, analysts, and even rival teams were watching closely because Ferrari arrived with one of the biggest upgrade packages seen so far this season. Naturally, that created a lot of excitement and a lot of pressure. But when the dust settled after the weekend, the results simply did not match the hype. Ferrari supporters were left disappointed, and many people across the paddock quickly started labeling the entire upgrade package a failure. Critics were saying it was the latest example of Ferrari bringing major updates without finding the huge performance leap needed to challenge at the very front. Instead of unlocking a clear advantage, some felt the new package only kept the car at roughly the same competitive level. However, the situation may not be as straightforward as it seems. Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur and several members of the team have pushed back against those claims. According to them, the upgrade package actually delivered the performance gains that their simulations predicted. In other words, Ferrari believes the new parts worked exactly as intended. But that creates an even bigger mystery. If the upgrades are doing their job, then where is the remaining gap coming from? Why is Ferrari still finding itself 3, 4, and sometimes even 5/10ths behind the benchmark pace in qualifying and race conditions? That's the question generating so much debate right now. That's also why the word failure appears in quotation marks. Personally, I don't think that label tells the full story. There are still several encouraging signs for Ferrari fans, and there are reasons to believe the team can build on what they learned in Miami. The bigger picture is far more interesting than simply looking at the final gap on the timing sheets. At the same time, Ferrari isn't the only team worth discussing. Red Bull made a huge statement during this Grand Prix and showed a level of performance that grabbed everyone's attention. In many ways, they managed to overshadow Ferrari's upgrade debut and remind the rest of the grid why they remain such a dangerous force. McLaren also deserves plenty of credit because they continue to be right in the mix and are showing impressive consistency at the front. And Ferrari certainly didn't arrive with a small collection of updates. This was a major development push, with the team even describing it as a package and a half. The changes included a new floor, updated floor edges, a revised rear diffuser, suspension modifications, beam wing adjustments, and the long-awaited introduction of the rotisserie rear wing. Ferrari also made revisions to the front wing and end plates while carrying out weight-saving measures to improve ballast flexibility. Looking purely at cornering performance, the car looks incredibly strong, and through many sections of the track, it appears absolutely planted and full of confidence. The challenge is figuring out why those gains are not yet translating into the overall pace advantage Ferrari was hoping to achieve. The chassis side of Ferrari's project has actually done a fantastic job this season. When it comes to innovation and bringing fresh ideas to the grid, Ferrari has consistently been one of the teams leading the charge. That's something that deserves real credit because the engineers have clearly been pushing hard to find performance in areas where other teams have been more conservative. Time and time again, Ferrari has introduced creative solutions, and many of those developments have helped keep them near the front of the field. Looking specifically at Miami, there were definitely signs that the car itself had strong potential. Leclerc topped the timesheets during parts of the weekend, and when you dive into the telemetry data, Ferrari looked incredibly competitive through several sections of the circuit. In many of the corners, especially the faster sequences, the car appeared stable, confident, and capable of carrying impressive speed. There were moments where Ferrari genuinely looked like a serious threat, but Miami is a track that puts a huge emphasis on power. While there are important high-speed and low-speed corners spread throughout the lap, the long straights play a massive role in determining overall performance. Cars spend a significant amount of time at full throttle, which means engine power becomes a major factor. Because of that, teams with stronger power units naturally gain a valuable advantage over the course of a lap, and that's exactly how things seem to play out by the end of the weekend. What's interesting is that both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton came away relatively positive about the feel of the car. Neither driver sounded disappointed with the upgrades themselves. In fact, both suggested that the package delivered some of the improvements Ferrari had been targeting. The updates appeared to help in areas where the car had previously struggled, particularly in the low-speed and medium-speed corners. Ferrari has already been strong in high-speed sections for much of the season, so seeing gains in those weaker areas was an encouraging sign for the team. However, the bigger story may have had less to do with the upgrades and more to do with how the race unfolded. Before even discussing pure car performance, Ferrari's strategy decisions raised quite a few questions. The team reacted early to George Russell's stop and committed to a pit strategy that may not have been the strongest option available. There were alternative approaches that could have allowed Leclerc to stay in cleaner air and potentially protect his position for longer. Instead, traffic became a major problem. Leclerc found himself trapped behind slower cars at critical moments of the race, and that completely changed the picture. Every lap spent fighting through traffic made life more difficult and prevented him from maximizing the pace that was available in the car. By the time the race developed, he never really got the opportunity to put sustained pressure on drivers like Lando Norris or Kimi Antonelli. The strategy situation left Ferrari chasing the race rather than controlling it. And then there's the issue that may be hurting Ferrari more than anything else right now: straight line speed. From the car's side, the chassis looks extremely competitive, but reports and data suggest the power unit could still be down by roughly 20 to 30 horsepower compared to the strongest engines on the grid. At a circuit like Miami, that's a deficit that can become impossible to hide, especially when every long straight exposes the difference lap after lap. One of Ferrari's biggest headaches right now appears to be coming from the power unit side rather than the chassis itself. Reports continue to suggest that the battery system is draining faster than some of its rivals, while software-related issues are affecting energy deployment during crucial moments. Time after time, Ferrari seems to run into problems when it comes to getting maximum electrical performance down the straights. Whether it's on Lewis Hamilton's side of the garage or Charles Leclerc's, there always seems to be some kind of complication involving deployment, energy recovery, or electronic systems that prevents them from extracting everything available. And that's becoming a costly problem. Modern Formula One cars are incredibly dependent on efficient energy deployment, especially on circuits with long acceleration zones. Every bit of electrical power matters, and even small losses can translate into significant chunks of lap time. When Ferrari is unable to deploy energy as effectively as its rivals, the weakness becomes immediately visible on the straights. It's not a one-off issue either. This has become a recurring theme across multiple race weekends, and it's an area that the team urgently needs to improve if they want to consistently fight at the very front. The encouraging part for Ferrari fans is that this straight-line deficit appears to be where most of the lost lap time is coming from. When comparing sector times, Ferrari often looks extremely competitive through the corners and technical sections of the track. The major losses tend to happen during acceleration and top speed phases, where Mercedes, McLaren, and occasionally Red Bull are able to pull away. That suggests the underlying performance of the car may actually be stronger than the final results indicate. Speaking of Red Bull, Miami highlighted just how important engine performance can be. While Red Bull's upgrade certainly played a role in their improved showing, their power unit package also looked exceptionally strong throughout the weekend. The combination of efficient deployment and impressive straight-line speed helped make the car much more competitive than it had appeared at some previous events. In pure race pace, however, there are still questions about whether Red Bull can consistently match the tire management and chassis balance shown by McLaren and Ferrari over a full stint. The gap is not enormous, but it's still there. If Max Verstappen had avoided some of the setbacks that affected his race, he likely could have finished much closer to Leclerc. Even so, Ferrari still appears to hold a small advantage in overall chassis performance. Despite dealing with a noticeable power deficit, the car continues to show outstanding speed through many cornering sections. In fact, there is a strong argument that Ferrari currently has one of the most complete chassis packages on the entire grid. That's why calling the Miami upgrades a failure doesn't really tell the whole story. The updates seem to have delivered exactly what Ferrari expected from a chassis and aerodynamic standpoint. The problem is that many fans expected a dramatic leap in overall competitiveness, and that simply didn't happen. The gains were real, but other weaknesses are still preventing Ferrari from fully cashing in on them. One area that remains a concern is tire management. As the race progressed, Leclerc's pace began to fade, while drivers like Kimi Antonelli, Oscar Piastri, and Lando Norris were still finding speed and setting some of the fastest laps of the race. That suggests Ferrari may have improved the car in several key areas, but there is still work to do when it comes to preserving tire performance over longer runs and maintaining peak pace deep into a stint. The power deficit isn't the only issue Ferrari is fighting right now. Another major concern continues to be tire management, and Miami once again exposed some of those weaknesses. Ferrari still seems to struggle with keeping the tires in the ideal operating window for long periods, especially on the harder compounds. What's interesting is that the race conditions weren't particularly demanding from a tire perspective. Temperatures were lower, the skies remained overcast for much of the event, and there was even the threat of rain hanging around throughout the race. In theory, those conditions should have made tire management a little easier, yet Ferrari still appeared to have trouble consistently extracting the best performance from the tires. The challenge isn't just about wear either. It's also about getting the tires switched on quickly, maintaining the right temperature range, and avoiding excessive graining that can hurt performance over a stint. When rivals are able to keep their tires alive and operating at peak efficiency, Ferrari often seems to lose ground as the race develops. That's an area that still requires significant attention if they want to turn strong pace into consistent race-winning performances. Qualifying pace also remains a concern. While Ferrari has shown flashes of excellent speed over a single lap, the gap to the front is still larger than the team would like. A big portion of that can be linked to the power unit issues discussed earlier. Through many of the corners, Ferrari looks extremely competitive. The car rotates well, carries strong mid-corner speed, and performs impressively in traction zones thanks to a suspension setup that appears very well balanced. Time and time again, Leclerc has been among the quickest drivers through Sector 2, often setting benchmark times in the most technical parts of the circuit. The problem is that those gains are often erased elsewhere. Even with strong cornering performance, Ferrari is still finding itself 3, 4, and sometimes even 5/10ths behind the pace setters. We saw similar patterns earlier in the season, including in Japan and Miami, only reinforced those concerns. The upgrades have clearly moved the team forward, but the jump may not have been large enough to close the gap to the very front of the field. That makes the upcoming races incredibly important. With Mercedes expected to introduce additional upgrades in Canada, Ferrari cannot afford to stand still. The next Grand Prix in Montreal could be a key moment for the team because they still need to fully understand and optimize this latest package. Historically, Ferrari has often needed a few races before getting the maximum benefit from major aerodynamic changes. The raw potential may already be there, but unlocking every bit of performance is another challenge entirely. On top of that, the deployment software issues need to be addressed as quickly as possible. If Ferrari can improve the way the power unit and energy systems work together, they could immediately recover valuable lap time without needing major hardware changes. That's why the next phase of development could be so important. Looking further ahead, there are still plenty of reasons for optimism. If Charles Leclerc can remain within striking distance of the leaders and Ferrari continues bringing upgrades at the pace we've seen so far, this team absolutely has the potential to fight for victories later in the season. That's why calling the Miami package a complete failure feels far too harsh. It may not have delivered the dramatic breakthrough many fans were expecting, but compared to Ferrari's struggles in previous years, the team has actually made meaningful progress. The foundation looks strong, the chassis remains one of the best on the grid, and if Ferrari can solve a few of these lingering weaknesses, race wins could be much closer than they currently appear. Historically, Ferrari hasn't always been the team that dominates when it comes to mid-season development. That's why this latest upgrade package should still be viewed as a positive step, even if it wasn't the dramatic breakthrough many supporters were hoping for. The team has clearly moved forward, but the reality is that the gains don't yet appear large enough to consistently challenge the strongest Mercedes-powered cars, and if Red Bull continues introducing updates of its own, the fight at the front could become even tougher over the next few races. That's why so much attention is already shifting toward the middle of the season. Reports continue to suggest that a significant engine-related improvement could arrive around the Silverstone or Spa period. If those reports prove accurate, that could be the real turning point for Ferrari's campaign. Right now, the team looks like it has a very competitive chassis package, but it still lacks the overall package needed to maximize results every weekend. An engine step forward could completely change that equation and help unlock much more of the car's potential. However, the power unit isn't the only area Ferrari needs to keep improving. Another interesting talking point from Miami was the introduction of the team's updated rear wing package. Ferrari arrived with high hopes for the design, expecting gains in efficiency and straight-line performance. But throughout the weekend, Red Bull's solution attracted just as much attention, if not more. Based on what could be observed, Red Bull's design appeared extremely effective. The slot gap looked larger, the wings seemed to transition more efficiently between operating states, and the overall package appeared highly refined. There were multiple moments where Charles Leclerc appeared to be making manual adjustments to optimize rear wing behavior and maintain stability heading into slower sections of the circuit. While that's not necessarily a major problem on its own, it highlighted the fact that Ferrari may still be searching for the perfect balance between straight-line speed and downforce retention. What's particularly impressive is how polished Red Bull's solution already looks. Of course, it's important to remember that development timelines are never fully public. Various reports have suggested Red Bull may have been working on aspects of this concept for 5 or even 6 months before it appeared on track. Ferrari has also been developing within a similar performance window, but the two teams seem to have arrived at different solutions. At least from an outside perspective, Red Bull's approach currently looks extremely efficient and potentially more effective in maximizing overall performance. Another interesting point concerns the expectations surrounding Ferrari's rear wing. Some reports from outside sources suggested the package could deliver a significant increase in straight-line speed, with gains being discussed in the range of several kilometers per hour. However, based on the available data from Miami, those gains did not appear to fully materialize. Ferrari's top speed performance remained relatively similar to what had been seen previously, which suggests the team's biggest weakness still lies elsewhere. At the moment, the evidence points back toward the power unit deficit and possibly some additional drag generated by the overall car package. Those factors seem to be contributing far more to Ferrari's straight-line struggles than the rear wing itself. Fixing those areas would likely provide a much bigger performance boost than any single aerodynamic tweak. As for the drivers, there was an interesting contrast in outlook after the weekend. Leclerc appeared relatively encouraged by the direction Ferrari is taking and seemed to focus on the positives from the upgrades. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, sounded somewhat more frustrated with how the weekend unfolded. That reaction is understandable, though, because he was dealing with significant damage during the Miami Grand Prix, and that undoubtedly impacted both his pace and his overall race result. With those circumstances in mind, it's difficult to draw firm conclusions from Hamilton's side of the garage just yet. Looking at the bigger picture, Ferrari's long-term focus has to be on getting more out of the power unit package. The chassis is already showing signs of being one of the strongest on the grid, but that advantage is being held back by deployment limitations, software-related issues, and a lack of straight-line performance compared to some of their biggest rivals. The team needs those systems operating at maximum efficiency every single weekend. Just as importantly, they need the ADU improvements to arrive and deliver the gains that many inside the paddock expect. If that happens, Ferrari could suddenly become a genuine threat at almost every circuit on the calendar. At the same time, Ferrari can't afford to slow down its aerodynamic development program. The competition is moving too quickly. McLaren continues to push forward with an aggressive upgrade strategy, and every race weekend seems to bring another sign that they're finding more performance. That's a team I definitely want to discuss in a separate video because their progress has been one of the biggest stories of the season so far. If you'd like to see that breakdown, let me know. When you evaluate the entire Miami weekend, I think it's fair to say the Ferrari upgrades did work. The problem is that they didn't deliver the size of gain many people expected. Ferrari moved forward, but the step was relatively small compared to what some of their rivals achieved. McLaren appeared to make a much bigger leap, while Red Bull also looked like it extracted more from its latest developments. Out of the major teams that arrived with significant upgrade packages, Ferrari arguably gained the least overall performance. That's where the failure argument starts to come from. Not because the upgrades didn't work, but because they weren't enough to dramatically change Ferrari's position in the pecking order. Meanwhile, Mercedes didn't bring nearly as much to Miami, which makes the next race even more interesting. Canada features several long straights and heavy braking zones, but it may actually suit Ferrari's characteristics a little better than Miami did. The layout could allow the team to show a stronger version of what this package is capable of. Can Ferrari win in Canada? It's possible, but it won't be easy, especially if Mercedes arrives with a new package that works immediately. The good news for Ferrari is that it's a sprint weekend, which always adds unpredictability and creates opportunities for teams that can adapt quickly. If they can get the car into the right operating window from the start, they could absolutely put themselves in the fight. Those are my thoughts on why this package has been labeled a failure by many fans, even though I think the reality is much more complicated than that. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Ferrari's Miami upgrade package was a failure, or do you believe the team is heading in the right direction despite the results? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with other F1 fans. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these deep dive discussions coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.